I want to share a few slides with you today and introduce business in the community for those of you who haven't come across business in the community before, and to give a sense of how we work with businesses and the type of advice that we give to business organisations whenever it comes to engaging with their communities. And what I'm hoping is, by giving a sense of what we're trying to persuade businesses to do on their side, that helps prep and provide some pointers for what you can do to be ready for the approach that they're most likely going to take. And also, I'd be really keen to hear, after this event or even through the panel, whether we're missing some tricks from business in the community's perspective and the advice and the direction that we're giving to businesses, because we're not claiming to always have it perfect. Nothing ever is. So anything that we can do to improve the support and advice that we're giving to businesses, we would be all ears, because that would be really welcome. So just by way of introduction, some of you may have come across business in the community before, or potentially through the previous event that we did with BUC. But just by way of recap to kick us off, we are Northern Ireland's only network for responsible business. We work with a whole range of organisations across business or across the province, and over 220 of them currently at the moment. They do encompass the leading companies, the ones that you would probably expect, the likes of PwC we heard from previously, the large retailers, the banks and so on. But we also have a lot of much more smaller family-owned Indigenous organisations as well. So the spread that we have in terms of sector and size of organisations is quite great. And actually, collectively, those organisations employ over 40% of the working population in Northern Ireland. So if we can get them oriented towards a specific issue and working and pushing in the same direction, the impact that can have actually can be quite sizable, particularly if you think that those employees are taking the messages home and potentially spreading it even further. Our whole reason for being is to support and challenge business to be a force for good in society, and we're really passionate about that. What that looks like has changed and transitioned in many ways over the years. It's certainly become much broader whenever we think about what does it mean to be a sustainable or a responsible business. But ultimately, it is really about putting businesses at the heart of their communities and vice versa. And you'll see on the right-hand side there, we have a great board, really engaged, always pushing us to do the best as we can, but also wanting to ensure that we push them and push our members as well to ensure that they are doing the best they can for society and environment. Our background actually is founded in the community. I guess that's where our name comes from, business in the community. But many moons ago now, 40 years ago, we were founded actually on the back of the Brixton riots, where a group of businesses got together and said, we need to do something about this. This doesn't make sense for our communities. It doesn't make sense for our businesses. What can we do collectively to try and help engage and improve our communities in various shapes and forms? So they got together and created a number of different interventions and projects that were really geared towards trying to upskill local communities, engage local communities, understand what was happening at grassroots level, and to try to better understand what they could do as businesses to help share their skills and resources to help tackle some of those issues. And that's where business in the community was founded. And that kind of convening, pulling together to try and have some kind of impact is still very much at the heart of what we're all about as an organisation. Our vision is to achieve a world where responsible business is at the core of every organisation, and we do believe that business can and should be a force for good. And I would say that we are definitely seeing a shift in business attitudes towards what it means to be a responsible or sustainable organisation. Probably, let's say 10 years ago, even 6-7 years ago, or potentially even 4 or 5, part of our job often was to persuade organisations that they should be trying to better engage in this area, that there was a moral but also a business imperative to be responsible, to be trying to think about your impact on the environment, to think about how you best engage with society. And we had sometimes a bit of a persuasion job to do, which I kind of enjoyed, but that was a big part of what we were about. there's been a huge shift over the last 2 years where that aspect of persuasion is not needed anywhere near as much anymore. What we are seeing, and probably on the back of what organisations have witnessed through lockdown, the kind of spotlight on some of the societal challenges that we're having, that lockdown provided, has really opened organisations' eyes to some of the things that are happening in society that they potentially weren't just as aware or appreciative of in the past. And now they really want to do something constructive and productive whenever it comes to their community engagement. So I'd say more than ever, we're pushing on an open door whenever it comes to business willingness, but we're also seeing a shift in business attitudes into how they want to be a responsible business. And I'll get to that in just one second. As I said earlier, what it means to be a responsible organisation has shifted hugely. So, 30 years ago, it tended to be about a charitable contribution, and business then just went about business as usual. Aside from that, things have shifted hugely now, where businesses are saying we have a responsibility and an opportunity to actively engage whenever it comes to social and inclusion and prosperity, for instance. What is it that we can do to ensure that everybody can achieve to the best of their abilities in the communities? What is it that we can do to try and ensure that we minimise our environmental footprint? And certainly climate change is a very big piece at the moment for a lot of our organisations. And well-being and inclusion is a very, very big issue, and one that probably in this diagram looks quite exclusively around employees, but it's one that's of interest to businesses much more widely whenever it comes to community health. And they're particularly interested around mental health, and not just within the workforce, but also the wider communities. And that's an area that is really starting to gain some traction. And it's our job to try and ensure that we work with our member organisations to engage them in these areas. And we talk about the 3 Ps, where we say to be a responsible organisation, you need to think about your people, your current workforce, but also your future workforce. What are you doing to be an inclusive employer, but also one that reaches people that are potentially in hard to reach communities, for instance, long-term unemployed? What are you doing to try and pull them into the workforce? What are you doing in terms of the planet and your environmental footprint? And then the final bit, and this is a bit that I want to just focus on for the next 10 minutes or so, what are you doing in the places in which you operate? What is your definition of community? And that's often our starting point. What does community mean to you as an organisation? Who are or is your community? And what way and how can you best engage with them in a way that makes sense for the community, but also makes sense for you as a business? And it's that win-win that organisations are seeking more and more. But sometimes it isn't just a black and white win-win, and I'll get to some of the nuances of that just now with the next slide. So whenever we're at supporting organisations and advising them around this place piece, we use 5 key principles of good engagement. And this is what I really want to focus on for ultimately the rest of my window that I have here this morning. Because I want to share with you what we're saying to organisations on their side, so that it can inform how or what to expect from them on your side. And these 5 principles of good engagement are included in a document that we can share with you afterwards, that give you a sense of how we engage with businesses in this space whenever it comes to community engagement. The first area that we start with is with businesses to say, as a business, identify the social issues that are most relevant to your business and are also most pressing to the communities that you work with. Now, for some organisations, this is very obvious to them, that they will know that, for instance, they'll all have, some of them will have very key issues that they want to focus on straight away. So for instance, Openreach are very clear that they want to focus on digital inclusion. That's something that's important to them as a business. It's also a very important community issue. For others, they may need a bit of support in doing that. And I suppose from a community organisation side, the things that businesses would really appreciate and probably find incredibly helpful are a very brief, to the point pitch of what it is that your organisation focuses on and does. We're talking maximum 1 side of a page. So the social issues that you work towards and how you go about trying to tackle those, and really clearly articulating what it is that you are trying to impact on and do impact on as an organisation. And any kind of brief or quick stats or testimonials that can endorse the impact that you're having is something that will definitely pique businesses' interest. Now, a lot of businesses are increasingly formalizing the way that they engage with community organizations. So they potentially will have an internal committee with criteria that they need to share, that they have to kind of work towards in order to identify who it is that they would like to support and how. Others will have policies that are available on their website, for instance. And certainly, I think to try and identify those businesses that are most likely to potentially want to engage with you, I would definitely take a look at the business's responsible business strategy. A lot of these are now publicly available on their websites. See what it is that they're trying to share on social media to get a sense of what it is that's important to that organization. And they'll often identify 2 to 3 key social issues or priorities that they want to work towards as part of their responsible business or sustainability strategy. And that's a very good starting point to be able to identify those businesses that are the best match for your organization. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and ask, can you point me to someone who looks after your community engagement? It would be great to have a short conversation with them to understand what the priorities would be over the next 6 to 12 months, for instance. So often organizations will have someone that has responsibility for this, and as I say, a committee. But don't be afraid to inquire as to how decisions are made, or is there a policy or a strategy in place that can help you ensure that you're pitching to the right types of organizations. The next point that we say to businesses is it's very important that you work in partnership with your communities to leverage combined expertise for mutual benefit. And this is definitely the area that we're seeing a lot more priority whenever it comes to businesses. Businesses are traditionally would have associated a lot of community engagement with cash. And they're not saying for one second that that's not an aspect of how they want to partner in the community. It often still is. But what they're particularly interested in is this combined expertise, this mutual benefit, this skill sharing and peer learning. They really want to learn about the expertise or learn from the expertise and experience that you have in your organizations. They really want their employees to be able to avail of that, and to potentially their employees to develop of their own skills in some shape or form as a consequence of the partnership that they would have with your organization. So definitely whenever it comes to a conversation or a pitch to an organization, or whenever you're developing a relationship with a business, definitely think about the skills that you can bring to the table, the opportunities that there may be for the businesses to learn from you, but also, is there anything that you want to try and learn from the business? Potentially they have some skills in-house that you would really like to avail of. And that's the type of conversation and partnership working that businesses will definitely welcome and will see as a big enhancement to a community partnership proposal for them. Next, we say manage your community investment using appropriate resources to deliver against targets. So organizations are increasingly creating community engagement targets. To be honest, they struggle with this sometimes. And Amanda later on will probably talk quite a bit about social value, or if she's not going to talk about it today, I'd say she could deliver a whole different session on it. But this idea around the value that organizations are giving to the communities and providing within communities via their partnership is something that they are very interested in, but not always sure about how to best measure and evaluate and plan that through. So anything that you can bring to the table in terms of an action plan, measurables, starting to think towards, if we were evaluating this a year down the line, what would the so what metrics be? How do we know this partnership would be successful? Coming to the table with some of those ideas about appropriate targets is something that a business would definitely welcome and would welcome a discussion around. Now, they may have ideas too. They may already have some preset targets that you would need to have a conversation around, but proactivity around that is definitely something that would be greatly welcomed by businesses. Next, we say about inspiring and engaging your employees, customers, and suppliers to support your community programs. This is a trick that sometimes is missed on both sides. Sometimes businesses, community organisations enter into these brilliant partnerships. They get a huge amount from it if they're planned and there's a lot of synergy there. But then they miss the chance to share this. And we're definitely seeing a lot more appetite within the business community to try and engage their supply chain in their responsible business activities. So they're doing it whenever it comes to the environment, they're doing it whenever it comes to the employee health and well-being, and they're increasingly starting to think about how can we bring others along on this journey whenever it comes to engaging in our communities. So if you're working with a business and they haven't broached this, then I certainly suggest that you broach it with them. Ask, is there possibility for potentially a bit of a show and tell, an inspirational site visit, an opportunity for introductions to their suppliers? Are there opportunities to try and bring employees on site and let them see firsthand the impact that your organisation is making, that ultimately they are partly involved in or fully involved in? Is there something there that you can do to really start to light up that kind of hearts and minds piece to engage employees further? And whenever businesses see that the target bit, the action plan bit, the kind of mechanical bit is being looked after, but also that real impactful grassroots, what's the difference that we're making here bit is starting to fire up, then that really becomes a very productive partnership that both business and community organisations are very proud of and want to share that story. And sharing that story further just ultimately strengthens a partnership and offers more opportunity for your organisations to potentially build similar partnerships with other businesses. And then finally, on measuring and evaluating the difference your investment has made in the community and your business. This is where we're seeing a lot of activity and attention being paid. And it comes back to that kind of green point as well about planning and managing. If at the start of a community partnership, you have planned and managed and thought about this section, then the blue part isn't as difficult. But it's definitely about pointing back to that so what question. And I don't mean that in a I hope that I don't mean that in a patronising way, but it's that to challenge that in a what difference are we making here? How can we best capture that? Sometimes that can be done with metrics, sometimes it can't. And businesses are okay with both qualitative and quantitative outcomes with this. They aren't fixated necessarily on a number. They enjoy a number, there's no doubt about that, but they certainly just want to be able to see, hear and feel the difference that these partnerships are making in the local community. And whenever they can see that they're having an impact thanks to your partnership, then that ultimately deepens that relationship even further. Just to give a sense of some of the ways that businesses have tried to engage or do engage via business in the community in the past, and I'll whip through these because I'm aware I'm slightly over time. Probably the biggest and most rapid pulling together of businesses to respond to a need was at the start of whenever the pandemic hit. And we pulled together a group of businesses to create the National Business Response Network, which was put together in a very short period of time, but was intended to provide local communities that were in need with basically very practical things like food and clothing, technology. And then we moved on to trying to share skills with people to help them try to build back from the pandemic. And we've made over 3,500 matches across the UK between businesses and community organisations as a consequence of that network. It's had a huge impact. There's estimations that over 1 million people have been impacted as a consequence of that. And that was a very good example of businesses coming to us to say, we know we want to do something in the community. Can you work with us to try and help us engage quickly and effectively? And that's where the Business Response Network came about. Last year, we realised, and I think many of us are very aware of some of the challenges that we have with young people and that we're potentially going to go hungry over school holidays. And we collaborated with local communities, government and businesses to deliver food and activities for young people over the summertime. And that again was something that in quite a short period of time where we identified a need, businesses stepped up and said, right, we want to do something about this. Both we will help in terms of financial resource, but we'll also help with skills and sharing our time. And that again was a very explicit example of businesses coming together in a very short period of time to try and overtly tackle poverty. Throughout lockdown, we've had a programme that's focused on trying to ensure that we tackle digital poverty as best we can. And again, we've had many businesses stepping up to try and do something to tackle digital poverty in our communities across Northern Ireland. And this was where you'll see the group of organisations there in the slide, who all got together and donated resources, donated and often skills to be able to use those resources to help ensure that communities across the province remain connected at a very, very critical time. And most recently, we convened a group of businesses on what we call as a seeing is believing visit, where we take organisations into the heart of communities across Northern Ireland. In this instance, it was in North Belfast, to hear from local community organisations firsthand about the work that they're doing, but also the support that they need. And there's some really brilliant connections that have been established in the back of this seeing is believing visit, where local business leaders just weren't aware of some of the work that was happening in local communities, didn't realise that they could quite quickly step in and offer support and resource. And some brilliant partnerships were made in the back of that visit and are now starting to already gain traction in terms of impact that we're seeing, thanks to that business community collaboration in North Belfast.